change directory code.
That's the other thing. So I can.
And now stack build. Does that work? Yeah.
So I can set up from anywhere.
Yes.
But I need to build from the same directory where.
Yes.
Okay. But is setup is reading what's in code?
No. Setup is actually setup here will default to download the latest version of GHC.
Okay.
And because for the code directory here, it was also built with the latest GHC and the latest stack snapshot. It doesn't need to do two things at once, right?
Okay.
But you need to be in the code directory or in the directory of the project you're building in order to use stack effectively to do something. Yeah. Have a bit?
Stack Duijvesteijn is working. I just ran it. Trying to find out what I need to start.
Oh yeah, shit. Can you type sudo apt install PostgreSQL tab completion might not work. PostgreSQL -server -dev -11.
I have the 10.
Oh, 10, also fine. So if you're on Ubuntu, things are not as easy as my initial instructions. You also need to type sudo apt install PostgreSQL -server -dev -major version, and then you should have the required headers to build the project. And the next time I'm doing this with Nix or Docker. All right, so who's trying to complete the exercises? And who's successfully gotten a version of PostgreSQL installed? All right. Still need some help over there. I'll try and sort you out, and then we can walk through some of the other stuff. After this, most of the server software crap is done, hopefully. Do you still need help? No? Working? Okay. Do you need it? Okay, sure. Have you gotten the server thing to work?
I didn't try it. I started to find docs for connection, but for last 10 minutes I didn't manage to.
Okay. Yeah, I pushed a new version. I made a typo on that one. So the first exercise, right? It's, or not really the first thing, but assuming you've got Postgres set up, created a few users, that kind of stuff. It says to find the docs for something. And if you don't have the experience with this in Haskell, you can go to this website. It's called stackage.org. There's also hackage.org. This is both of these versions have docs for libraries. But there's a search bar, and if you type connect info, then you get a library documentation page from the PostgreSQL simple library, and in there's a bunch of information about connect info. So I'll leave that one up on the screen. Do you need help with setup stuff?
I'm not have a problem connecting to the local Postgres. No, it should be right, if I remember right.
Yeah, it should be. Maybe systemctl reload Postgres.
Should restart that.
Or restart it, yeah. Are you on Ubuntu, Arch?
No, it's Fedora.
Fedora, all right.
So, who knows?
Yeah, reload does not reload pghba.conf.
No,
Yeah.
that restarted and also
Okay.
stopped and started it a few times. So.
Interesting. Oh, maybe because it first matches something for.
Try putting this off.
There's an ordering to those things, so. Yeah.
It is indeed.
Yeah. Cheers.
I can't find it on Google, so where is it? Should I search here?
Connect info. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I sorry, I didn't say that clear enough maybe, but I said there was a typo. I just pushed a typo fix. That's actually really annoying. Very sorry about that. And then you can exit using \Q. That's also in the docs, but this is quicker. Nice. Yeah, that's to test the permissions work. All right, so you're good. Very nice. So, other people still needing help with something?
Some more Postgres stuff.
I think the system just states now.
There was something like when he started to kind of try to run the systemctl thing.
Mhm.
No, it was.
Mhm. Ah. I should have. Yeah, this is your major version, probably. Yeah, so that one's actually. Service. Yeah, so this one's working. It's we installed 11, and it's and you were trying to start 10. Yeah. Yeah. So that's. Yeah, it's nice seeing all the the stuff you run into with writing docs. What? Yeah, but yeah, I mainly do Ubuntu servers, so this is fine, but not everything is just as easy.
Cool.
So who has gotten a connection with Postgres working from Haskell? Very nice. I'll give you some more time before I show it off, the actual solution. So if you want to create a connection to Postgres, I just showed you the type. You've seen it's in this kind of module, database PostgreSQL simple. And let me get a loop going. We can import it. Does that work? That works. Very nice. So there is this default connect info value in the database PostgreSQL simple module, and this is a pattern that you'll probably see quite often. It's they do this because if you have a type like here, and it's a record, and all fields are required, they want to be able to add new values and fields to a record like this. So normally if you do this and add a new record, you break existing code. Because if people list all the fields in a record and a new field is added to the record, existing code breaks. So what you see in a bunch of libraries is this kind of default value for connection info. And it's a good practice to start and use it. And you can use it like this. You can override just the values that you care about. So, yeah, well, localhost is something I care about, is a default, but the connect user is test. Connect password is test. And then see if it works. And then it's complaining, okay, this is not an expression. Now we're good. This is how you run it, actually. Stack exec schema control. That's because in package.yaml, there is an executable with the name schema control. It's right here. So that's how you can actually run the program that we're writing, which is a nice bit of information if you weren't familiar with it yet, which is how you can test stuff instead of just compiling stuff. So this con info thing is a value of type connect info. And the PostgreSQL module has a connect function, which takes connect info and returns an IO connection. So if we like format this a bit, so we can actually read it. Then we can use it. And that should compile, and it does. So then our program still doesn't do anything, but to prove a point, it prints high, so I'm actually editing the code going here. So question, right, if you're up for this, will this program actually make a connection to Postgres, or won't it? Haskell's a lazy language. What's happening? Does it connect to Postgres, this line? Or
Probably not.
won't it because we are not using it? Which one is true? People for won't connect to Postgres. People for will connect to Postgres. Second group is right, I think. We can test empirically and then reason about it. That's always a nice thing to do. Let me, sudo stop my database and then see if this still works. And it doesn't. Oh. So our server stopped running, but Haskell is a lazy language. How does this work? Well, if you desugar do notation, you can find out. And if you then Google normal forms and stuff, you can also figure it out. Basically, do notation desugars into a bind expression, and like actually getting here to the print and to the pure forces the evaluation of everything that came before. So con will be evaluated, and because con needs to be evaluated, it needs to the runtime needs to evaluate pg.connect, and that has a side effect. Little tidbit of information. So that's how you get the actual connection going. And yeah, from there's a bunch more exercises, I believe. So yeah, good luck with those. And oh yeah, if you're done with the exercises, then please give me a shout, and then I'll give you new ones.
Gave me the most trouble was remembering those two lines and figuring out exactly how to get into a query. Other than that, pretty straightforward. Now I'm trying to figure out how to actually structure the, not hard coding this thing and actually grabbing the migration.
It's getting nice. So did anyone get to the execute SQL file function already and get it to work? Nice, good job. If you want, I'll get you something else to do if you. I'll update the exercises in the repo. so two things. First of all, if you're going very fast, then you can refresh the GitHub page and there will be some new exercises for you to try out. Furthermore, I want to get into, well, we've seen how the connection stuff works, right? So then let's try and have a look to see if we can find out what query and execute do or what they represent. So we're still on this kind of docs page from the library. Query, let's see, it's right here. And if we take a look at the type, we see some type classes, and we see it needs a connection. It's very nice. We just learned how to make one. It needs something which is called a query. It's a data type. It needs something which has a 2-row instance, and it will result in a list of things which have a from row instance. So if you remember what I told you about new types and about foo and about bad opaque type signature in the first introduction, then this is roughly similar, right? It has some domain stuff and it's pretty nice. You get some idea of what the type parameters are. So the connection, you can figure out what it does. It is all the metadata that this function needs to actually like connect to Postgres. A query, if we go here, it's data query, and the docs here don't really mention anything about how it's constructed, but it says the underlying type is a byte string. And it also mentions something about how you can make something a query. It's because it's got an isString instance. So there's this language extension which is called overloaded strings, and it allows you to type this. It's basically, it transforms any string literal into a value of the type, which is an instance of isString. All right, so something, yeah, we can type in our source file something with our query stuff. And we need some 2-row stuff. Let's skip it. And we get some from row stuff. Let's also skip it. There's also a version with an underscore, and it returns a list of stuff right here. Execute is really similar, except it only does inserts and updates. It does not actually return results. Similar also has an underscore version, which does not have this like class constraint you see here. Yeah. So we have some way to create queries, namely we can type them into our source file, and then we can execute something. So let's try to actually do that for a bit. Let's see. This should actually be valid. That should type check. And we see we got some stuff. In this case, it's an error because I tried to execute a select statement. That's not allowed through the protocol. So yeah, let's do a query instead. Query underscore and it's complaining right here about an ambiguous type, probably. Yeah. The reason, if you see an error message like this, it shouldn't worry you. Like, these can be kind of scary, but that's if you deal with them a bit, you'll learn how to interpret them. You just need to look at it a lot. In this case, if we look at this error message, we'll see, hey, the compiler is telling something about ambiguous type variables. That sounds kind of scary, but if you think about it, going back to this function definition, the only thing it means is there's an R here, and the R is polymorphic. It is not, it isn't a very concrete type. It's anything which has a from row instance. So if you do this, then GHC won't know what you actually want to deserialize. So you can do something like this, hopefully. And then it's complaining about, oh yeah. And it's complaining about something. Oh yeah, and then it's a list. So the query, the library does not give you any length of the amount of items in the type variable, so we need a list of int. Then, oh, damn. Shit. Blah. No. Won't give this away yet. But I will explain this error message, and I will explain the library. We want a list of ints out of our query thing right here, right? Well, the library apparently does not know how to get integers from a database result row, which is kind of weird. You'd expect it to have something like that for like any reasonable library which is doing database stuff would ship with something for integers out of the box, if anything, right? So why are we seeing that there's no instance from row for int? It's because the library wants to push you in a direction where you define stuff like this, new types, this kind of stuff, because it's very you can define new types, and you can give these new types from row instances, which will allow you to actually perform database queries, read results, that kind of stuff later. Let me and the reason is so you get type safety, and the type safety will help you avoid mixing up things, switching fields, doing that kind of stuff. So this is actually getting ahead of my exercises a bit, so let's make it execute, insert into something like this. This works once. This does not work twice. So that's query and execute. So you want to...
Because I read from a file, so I'm taking the base string,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'd like to make a query out of it.
Yeah,
So,
that's the next exercise. Yeah, but I will... yeah, that's the tricky part. It's exercise number... I don't have one, two... Exercise number 5 is how to go from a byte string to a query. But I'll do the general solution in a bit. So if you're stuck, it's not in the. Yeah, try to look at the source code for the query and see if you can find it. So as a final note, just before the break, there's an exercise which wants you to take a byte string and return a query. It might require some searching, and what could the reason be that the interface of the library makes this a bit difficult? Does anyone want to have a guess? Security? Yeah.
Avoid you like manually interpolating values into the query strings.
Yes, exactly. It's SQL injections are like one of the top 10, maybe the top 1 most common vulnerabilities in web applications, and the library intentionally makes it difficult for you to just get user input, put it into a SQL query, send it off to the database. Because when you do that, you get a SQL injection. So there's some types, and the query type, in particular, which does not expose its constructor if you just import it by default. You need to go through your own custom types in order to get values from the user into a constructor. But for this particular application, we actually do want to take a byte string, and we actually do want to create a query out of that. So that's a bit unfortunate that we cannot. However, if you go to like the contents page, or no, actually, query. If you go to data query, and you want to know, hey, where does this come from, right? You have this sort, you have the source button right here, and that takes you to not the database PostgreSQL simple module. It takes you to database.postgresql.simple.types module. That's interesting. It's a different one than the one that we imported. If you take a look here. This is the type definition. And if you get the type definition and import this from the module which actually exports from query, then you can get a value of this type from a byte string. How you do that exactly is for after lunch.